This is a song to Professor Curious. Professor Curious is a person who are bad. He's a person who likes raping kids. He's a person who loves you. He likes to slaughter people. He likes to slaughter people. And Steven is complex. He's the one of the people. He's a maker, he's a maker, he's a fucking maker. He's a maker, he's a maker, he's a maker. Professor Curious is a terrible piece. He loves the world, he loves the world. And he's a little bastard, he's a bastard. He's a bastard, he's a bastard,
Curious a monster, he lies. He lies to attack and slander people because he's an evil person. And Professor Curious loves to suck dick because he's gay, because he's fucking gay. And because he's gay, because he's so gay. He's so gay, he's so gay, he's so gay. He's so gay, he's so gay, gay. He's so gay. He's so retarded. He's so retarded because his mom raised him with a scuba. And that's it. This is Professor Curious song. This is Professor Curious song. This is Professor Curious song. And the song ends.
My friend's birthday came up around the time that I started working on this video. Sadly, it came and went before I even got to the scripting stage. Anyway, to honour his birthday, I decided to play one of the most infamous Bond games because I knew it might make him sad. Anyway, 007 Legends is an ambitious but frightfully limited Bond anthology game, in which you go through several of the movies. Difference being that Daniel Craig is James Bond in every single one of these digital remakes of the classic movies. I do kinda like this as a setup, explaining one of the many possibilities as to how the Bond timeline actually works. I would say that it allows us to see how this particular Bond would react to certain things, but his Bond isn't much different to any other Bond, and the acting is so bad that it wouldn't matter if Craig was the David Tennant of Bonds. This game really wouldn't show it. One baffling choice that they go for is the films. They're all the Bond films that I thought were the least popular, such as His Majesty's Secret Service, Die Another Day, License to Kill, all of which are all Bond films that sort of fell to the wayside or were hated by the general public as far as I understand. Hell, some of these are disliked even by the fanbase. Goldfinger and Moonraker are in there as well, which I understand. I mean, they are very iconic films, not just Bond films, but iconic films in general. That's actual iconic, not Ubisoft iconic. But others just seem like they were picked because, well, they were the easiest to license. In fact, none of these films have scored any higher than a 6 on IMDb. For reference, Casino Royale and Skyfall scored 8 and 7 out of 10 respectively. The story is very reminiscent of Hitman Contracts in the sense that an accident causes an agent to remember his past, kind of jumping around to the good bits like a 10-year-old with a VHS tape of his favourite film. I do like this framing, especially for something like this or Hitman, and I feel that it really fits Bond spectacularly. Though, I have to admit, it really is just an excuse to skip to shootout scenes or scenes that they could do in a Call of Duty-esque style. Yes, this game really does feel like a Call of Duty clone, given that it plays the same in so many aspects, the control layout is strikingly similar, the animations and the way it feels is like COD, and the biggest giveaway is how everything is basically just a shootout. However, unlike COD, there's a little bit more to it than just shooting everything, and you'll eventually bear witness to that. So the game opens up on launch with a super high quality Daniel Craig blasting a hole in the screen and making it bleed. Honestly though, it looks like from the graphics it was ready to bleed anyway. This is the first of many hurdles that the animation and graphics trip over, taking an iconic scene and just making it look really cheap and dodgy. It's at this point that I noticed that the music doesn't even seem to be entirely licensed. You don't hear the traditional Bond theme anywhere, and get this music that really reminds me of the tanker theme from Metal Gear Solid 2.
Why does its intro music sound like Metal Gear Solid? Sounds like the tanker music from Metal Gear Solid 2.
Anyway, it's about this point that we're introduced to the cast of characters in all their glory. We've got Kung Lao Sr., Budget Pinhead, Nick from Left 4 Dead, Mommy Dearest. Well, I guess this is going to be a decent cast at least. I do appreciate that the game gives you the option between classic and modern gameplay styles. The difference being that the modern one plays more like a COD game with regenerating health, and the other is a bit more reminiscent of a 90s early 2000s FPS where you use health kits to stay alive. I feel like it'll reach out to a fair few player types, especially at this point where it felt like regenerating health was all that was left. 2012 really just did feel like it was the year of the COD clone. So the game opens up in Skyfall, something that I wasn't really aware of until much later on, as A, I remember nothing of these films, and B, pretty sure it didn't look like this anyway. This daft bitch takes a shot at James and some dude who are fighting on top of a train. She misses and Daniel Craig gets a very cheap but very painful belly button piercing. And hilarity ensues. I will warn you now, unlike the game, you don't actually find out the conclusion to this scene in this actual game. I'll explain how that works later. We start off at Bond's humble beginnings as an alcoholic, and this takes us through the Goldfinger portion. It recreates the scene where Bond finds the Golden Lady, but forgets the most important thing about any fucking scene: context. I don't know how any of this happened. I don't know why he's unconscious, I don't know why she's dead, and I don't know why she's gold. No, it doesn't explain any of it either. I know it explains it in the film, but what the fuck happened in this game? Did Bond get shit-faced or black out and stumble onto the scene of the crime? Did he murder her and then pass out and turn back into Jekyll? I think he did. I was legitimately surprised to see that they got Judi Dench back to voice her character. Partly because she's a big-named actress and I didn't think they could afford her, but also because they didn't bother getting anyone else. Daniel Craig is played by Ban Tegan from Dragon Age.
Nobody tells him what to do. Nobody! Ha 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 ha!
Quiet, uncle!
Who's actually a good actor and does a fantastic impression of the guy, but he sounds like he's had his emotions nulled by a Cyberman, and it kinda sours things.
Can I help you?
I want to know what you're up to with Goldfinger.
That's none of your business.
It became my business when Goldfinger's assistant turned up in a hotel room dead, painted gold.
Jill,
What is Goldfinger doing with a shipment of nerve gas?
I don't know.
When the game starts up, I immediately notice that it's basically COD, though it has one or two things that make it a bit better in my eyes. The first is being able to carry 3 weapons instead of 2, and the second are these rather funny melee takedown moves, which kinda lend themselves to the Bond charm and aesthetic, in a way that even I can appreciate. Also, unlike COD, you do get to do things like hacking or something similar with your Sony Xperia. It has an awkward hacking minigame where you have to keep these 2 nubbins on the same level as the coloured indicators. There's a safe cracking minigame which works the same way as the Trespasser in Ratchet & Clank, and another hacking minigame attached to it which is familiar, I just can't place where I've seen it before.
Yeah, mine doesn't do any of that. Also, the back's sort of melted on it and it's gone really sticky and gross.
One of the things about the setting that I found quite interesting is that they moved all of the movies up to the late 2000s to early 10s. Either that or Daniel Craig had a smartphone back in the 1960s. Anyway, after fighting my way through this compound, we get to the stealth portion, because apparently these guys didn't hear the massive war zone happening outside. I am rather thankful that the stealth section is completely optional, because honestly, if you just want to shoot the place up, you should just be able to shoot the place up. And given how the game's designed to the point that most reviewers all said that the stealth was terrible, I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of being forced to do stealth. There are one or two bits that are mandatory that you do stealth through them, but those segments are incredibly brief and really easy. So it's not quite like Kane and Lynch where you lose 12 years of your life to shitty stealth mechanics and stress. If you somehow die over the course of the game, you find that it has Duke Nukem Forever syndrome, and seems to take forever to load the game back in again. I never really understood this. Half-Life and Half-Life 2 can load you back in within the blink of an eye, and those are 8 and 10 years old respectively. At least when this game came out. Now they're 20 years old and they age even better because of that, whereas this age is even worse. I wouldn't even mind, but this isn't exactly pushing the PS3 to its limit. Given that this looks like a game from 2006 or 7, I doubt this would even push the PS2 to break a sweat. So after shooting my way through the stealth section, in Freddy's boiler room, I get to see Pussy Galore. No, really, that's her name, Pussy Galore. She interacts with this dude who is so nondescript that I legit thought that I killed him when I actually killed a generic soldier. Some great character design here. Some of the cutscenes have some lively animation, more so than others, to the point that they remind me of Half-Life 2 actually, whereas other cutscenes remind me more of Half-Life 1 because of how stilted and janky it all looks. Also, this game hasn't quite gotten elevators down pat, as NPCs are constantly shifting around in it. I mean, to be fair, it's only been a thing in video games for what, nigh on 15 years at this point. We then get to see the game's next big offering, which is the detective element where we search the office for hackables and biosamples, such as fingerprints. I actually like this part of the game as it feels like something that Bond should be doing instead of looking up women who have names that even call girls would say is too on the nose. Not to mention either that it does make it a lot more interesting than COD, especially when you're doing more than just playing follow the leader for 5 hours. It's kind of funny that Pussy Galore doesn't take too much convincing to go on his side. In fact, nobody does really. It's like that movie where nobody lies. Everyone just goes along with everything he says without question. It's like he's Donald Trump or something. At least the action in the cutscenes is okay for the most part. I was a bit worried that most of the animation would be flat out embarrassing, but it's not really the worst I've seen. Not much to write home about, but it has some 1 or 2 decent bits here and there. It actually also ends on this rather funny scene between Bond and Ling.
Start the engine. Drive back to the complex.
If you insist. You might want to fasten your seatbelt. I'd hate to lose a passenger.
Worry about yourself. Don't you?
As you please.
You then do the tied up with the laser beam scene, and I was a bit sad that this was just a cutscene, as I would have liked this to have been a puzzle where you had to figure out how to get out of this one. Kind of like in Heavy Rain, where there's something very similar actually, but just with a drill. You get kidnapped after you crash your car like a dumbass and taken to Fort Knox, because strapping you to a nuke and detonating it is a far more effective way of killing you than just a bullet to the base of the skull. I do like that in this scene the CIA turn up and hold the enemies under fire. James beats up the guards and gets control of their weapons, as the CIA then kill everyone, and then they throw a flashbang and knock James out on his ass. I don't know, you would have thought they'd start with the flashbang, but hey, I'm not a CIA operative. The rest of this is the Fort Knox raid part of the movie. Assuming that any of this fucking shit happens in the movie, I've not seen it in years. For all I know, it could end the exact same way Food Fight does.
Hold on, I'm playing a game on my phone.
Anyway, it's the same affair right through waves of stupid AI, trying not to get blown up by RPG launchers, and making it to the gold at the heart of the complex. The odd job fight is the most interesting bit, though it's mostly just a prolonged version of the fighting minigame, which isn't the worst thing ever, even if it takes a bit of getting used to, but it does feel like it undermines dramatic scene when you repeatedly deck a guy in the face. It's kind of hilarious, actually. After Kung Lao's dad gets a nasty shock, you have to disarm a nuke, which kinda had me excited until I found out that it was just a cutscene, which, again, lame. Having to disarm a nuke without any instruction is really kind of an awesome idea for a game. I do, however, like that it lands on 007 when the timer stops. That's a nice touch. Again, that could have been in the movie for all I know, but then again, there might not have even been a nuke in the movie. It might have been fucking Cheezel T. Weasel tearing up New York because he's on super steroids. So then this jackass walks in with his golden gun. Wait, isn't that a different movie? Anyway, James gives him some advice that he later breaks, like a hypocritical fuckwad.
It's dangerous to fire a gun in a plane, Goldfinger.
And the man with the big fat ass is sucked out the window. I do like that the gunfire doesn't even look like it should have even been close to the window that it destroys, though. That was kind of funny.
What do you mean accuracy failed? Did you not see that brilliant shot?
From what I understand, this is one of the worst performing Bond films of all time. According to this one website, it's the 5th worst, and License to Kill is also on here as one of the worst as well. I personally haven't seen this movie, but I have lived it, as it's the only one where I've actually been to the filming locations. So that's kinda cool. Anyway, it opens up with this chase scene on skis, and I fucking hate this shit. It's very poorly explained, and you will fail time and time again if you didn't know that you need to hold down an accelerate button in order to magically fart your way forward. It's only through this that you can keep up with Tracy, or Teresa, or Trevor, or whatever the game feels like calling her, and progress in this story. I honestly couldn't tell you if it was L2, R2, or both that accelerated you, so I just held them both down. It's nice when games just throw you into a whole new control scheme without giving you fuck all by way of instruction. I found this skiing mission to be excruciating even when I'd gotten the hang of it. Enemies just constantly fire rockets at you, there's a helicopter blasting at you, and you have no facility to cover, and you're constantly moving, making it very hard to shoot. I was actually starting to get worse at the game, because the loading times between deaths were actively pissing me off, especially when you get such a brief moment to actually play the game between them. I also found it hilarious when a helicopter clipped through Tony halfway down the mountain. This story is also a little clumsier than Goldfinger. Whilst the plot is a bit scatterbrained in that one, it's still basically intact. In this one, however, I don't fathom what the story is from this. I haven't seen the film. I have no idea what the story is. This game does not tell it very well. Anyway, we move to Murren Ski Lodge, which is the place that I visited. It's very close to how it was when I went. I just vaguely remember there being more military hardware scattered around the place. But apart from that, it's very accurate. Then you go down the elevator in this dark area where you have to put on your night vision. Oh, fucking hell. I'm getting fucking hunted down the Freeman flashbacks. Remember when I had to fucking empty my gun to see in that game? Fucking tragic that this is a way better game than that one. It's implied you'll have to do some detective work to find Tiara, but no, sadly not. You just plod around until the game decides you've done enough and you can move on, whilst this jackass states the bleeding obvious and just spouts nonsense entirely. So after that bit, you rescue the girl and chase Lex Luthor or whoever he is. Obviously, you can't just shoot him in the back, because I swear to Christ, I'd do so much better than actual video game protagonists with my ability to just think of shooting the person in the back as they're trying to run away. Seriously, pickpockets never get away from me in Red Dead Redemption. But, fuck it. We have more important things to worry about, like fighting Captain Slaphead on the cable car, which is unfortunately, unintentionally comedic as fuck as I keep punching him in the head. Anyway, the two almost end up kissing, but Bond remembers that he's straight and throws him down to his death. Then we get a phone call where Judi Dench mentions a resignation letter.
Bond to MI6.
What's Blofeld's status?
Unclear. Presumed dead.
Shall I tear up your letter of resignation?
No. The letter stands.
This was never mentioned before. I'm assuming it was better established in the film, but the only thing that I've heard about this was some background conversation, which I only heard playing the footage back to myself days later. We then get this follow-up scene where Bond and his lady friend, Thomas, go on a drive as James slowly turns into an Oblivion character. Anyway, this lady ends up getting shot to pieces in the car and just dies. It's so beautifully inept. I don't know what any of this was. I don't know what Judi Dench's monologue had to do with anything, because it's all really badly explained. Then begins the next story, License to Kill, which is what I'll need after this fucking game. Anyway, License to Kill was also a box office bomb, so this'll be fun. So James wakes up off the floor. It's really different to the other ones, I swear to Christ. And he's in the middle of a fight, and there's a dead agent, and Felix in a hotel room. A lot like Goldfinger, actually. I don't know the context behind any of this, and I also don't know why the fuck James had to skip town before the police arrive. I'm going to use several inferences to come up with the conclusion that Felix and James had a violent orgy and accidentally killed that woman and the other dude. Anyway, then this lady flies us to the ancient ruin in a helicopter. I'm starting to feel like my dad when he watches anything because I have no idea who anyone is or what's going on. The only thing I know about this game is that I must kill. So this bitch gets found out for wearing a wire, and James blows up a bunch of shit with some chargers that are a pain in the ass to set up, and then you find your lady friend and kick the shit out of Nick from Left 4 Dead. Well, until he gets saved by a Hispanic metrosexual version of me, who ends up facing a crushing defeat. You then escape and have this vehicle segment. It's a bit awkward to get through, partly because it looks and feels like an early PS2 era rally racer, but also because they won't stop firing fucking RPGs and heavy machine guns at you. Thankfully, it barely seems to matter. You then have to fend off a bunch of trucks and a chopper with a pistol, and fight your way onto a truck and have another fight with Nick, who doesn't seem to remember to watch the fucking road. You then end up in a fist fight with the dude, which feels the same as all the other fist fights, because it is the same as all the other fist fights, and then you blow something up and the movie ends on a high note, with Nick having his face burnt off. It's at this point that you see how crippled this game is. They do this club scene that's supposed to look impressive, but everyone inside it's a clone. The audio is just weirdly out of place, like they've put some static recording over the actors, and a lot of it just feels so stilted. This actually makes the club in Kane and Lynch look good, which is a travesty as that was previously one of the worst club scenes I'd ever personally witnessed. Anyway, I find my informant. The clue was that she's the only woman in the building who looks remotely unique. She introduces herself as Jinx, and apparently she's a stand-in for Halle Berry, who doesn't reprise her role in this game, and Rosalind Pike's character, who was cut entirely. Which, just kind of makes me sad because Rosalind Pike being hot is literally the only thing that I remember about Die Another Day. So yeah, my Die Another Day expertise have officially ended. So you find this dude in power armor. I think they've changed the plot around here because I swear this dude was Diamond Face in the actual movie. Maybe I'm wrong. Or was he a Korean dude who changed race? Or was he all three? I don't fucking know. Anyway, you have to have a fight with him, with the power armor, and save this chica from the lasers. You have a fist fight, and it's a bit more involved than the last laser scene, but all you do is punch Pinhead's loser cousin repeatedly in the face. After you escape from there, you actually end up having another driving segment, this time in a fancy car on ice. So this driving segment works a little bit differently. You have to use traction controls not to slide off of the ice, and I thought that you might strategically need to use the traction controls to gain and lose speed, but no, I was giving the game way too much credit. Turning off traction just makes it impossible to win. I do really like how you have to dodge the lasers though. It's actually pretty fucking cool, the effect's not bad. I also like as well that they don't make this part specifically difficult because they want you to just sort of enjoy the spectacle of it, and I feel like it really works. So then you have to drive onto an aeroplane, which is kind of funny because if you miss the aeroplane it just flies off without you. I was expecting them to drive in the river, but apparently they don't. Anyway, Bond gets onto the plane and immediately forgets what he said in Goldfinger and just empties his gun on the aeroplane. Fucking hypocritical wanker. You then have a fist fight with that dude in power armor by punching him repeatedly in the face. Yeah, just remember that next time you play Fallout 4, I'm sure that'll go equally well. I also can't help but notice they kind of negate the point of this scene, or at least what I remember. Because I swear his dad comes in, and he's all disappointed because his son's a white bread cracker, and he's just kind of sad. And then the son's sad because his father rejects him for being whiter than Kirk Cameron and Vanilla Ice's baby. But that element is actually important because it causes him to reveal his identity to his father, who doesn't exist in this game. So there's no reason for him to tell us who this stupid bastard is. Actually, stupid bastard is exactly how I describe him, because he does so many dumb things. Like, he stops you from being sucked out the newly made airlock, only to further risk you killing him. And then he's stupid enough to have a button on his suit that does this. Like, what the fuck? I know Bond villains are often Darwin Award winners, but this guy takes the fucking cake. I then opened up the back door to the plane to escape, and somehow ended up winning my own Darwin Award by getting ran over by my own car in a rather silly way, and I just sort of float away into space during this bizarre game over screen. Anyway, this portion of the game ends on a note that's about as personal as someone throwing you a wet wipe after sex, and that's about it. I guess the android that replaced Rosamund Berry was decommissioned the next day.
Nice working with you, Mr. Bond.
Sometimes you just get lucky.
Let's not jinx it.
Moonraker is the best bit in my opinion. Not only does it look the best, but it also has the most coherent story out of the three. At least when condensed down into this game. It has Jaws in it, who seems to fit the part quite well, and there's some fun stuff that's unique to these chapters, like anti-grav segments in space that actually look quite good. They sell the illusion decently and I can kind of get behind it. My biggest issue is that it took me forever to figure out what some of these objectives actually wanted from me. And even though I've done them, I don't even know what the shit I did that was right. The biggest offender here is this alarm segment where you have to flick switches until the alarms and turrets go off. I found this to be a huge pain as nothing I did seemed to work, and every time I found all of the switches, it turned out I hadn't, and there was another bloody one right around the corner. Despite this one working best as a story, it does have some comedically breakneck plot points, like when James convinces Jaws to join him by saying, "You know, they'll probably betray you, mate." And he's like, "Oh yeah, me like Bond now." And that's really all it takes. I also found it hilarious that you can beat up innocent people in this one, unarmed characters who are otherwise not a threat. It's even funnier that some of them are women, and Daniel Craig just fucking karate chops their throats.
I legit can't imagine Daniel Craig's reaction to being told that there's a video game where someone with his face beats up random women. It's like, pretty sure that's not what he had in mind when he signed the papers for the likeness rights.
Despite there being some cryptic segments, this is what I consider to be the highest note, and it's a good one to end on. I actually was kind of enjoying myself by this point and found it to be the most interesting campaign. What with the laser guns and the zero-G battles and the weird hacking segments and beating up the ladies. Then the credits roll, and you realise that the Skyfall train fight from the beginning doesn't ever get resolved. So I'm guessing Jimpy Bond drowned in the river. I like a happy ending, I guess. Wait, what's this? DLC for Skyfall coming in November? So you had to wait a month for it if you bought this shit at launch? This isn't exactly Skyrim or another game where it's going to take days to beat. This one took me about 5 hours. It is actually the length of a Call of Duty campaign to get from beginning to end. Probably because it is a Call of Duty campaign. Well, fuck. I guess what we'll have to do is download the Skyfall DLC, and, well, I guess we do have time for this content. Seriously, this episode's a lot shorter than I was expecting it to be. So, here we go. Skyfall. Honestly, I wish I'd fucking ended it at Moonraker. 'Cause Skyfall is my least favourite segment in the game. Basically, Skyfall wasn't even in cinemas when this came out, so they either didn't know much about it or weren't allowed to do too much on it, or maybe a bit of both, I don't know. So anyway, the whole of Skyfall segment is just the opening to the film, including the bit that we saw at the beginning. It's kind of like a Friday the 13th game where you just play as the opening kill. So the first bit starts very similarly to License to Kill, where you end up in a fucked up room surrounded by dead bodies. Is there any other way these stories can start? I like to imagine that James was fucked up on drugs the night before and did all this himself again. This is actually a very deep and psychological story, guys. Anyway, he goes after this baddie, who I don't even remember from the film because he's the opening kill and he's meant to be forgettable. Seriously, again, it is like a Friday the 13th game where you play as fucking Chad Kensington, getting killed in the opening, and they're like, yep, that's the game. So the first mission is meant to be a chase scene across rooftops, but the devs weren't able to do that as the AI is kinda thick in this game, so rather than an intense chase sequence with QuickTime events and shit, it's just shoot your way through a horde of enemies and clear the area. Which is incredibly dumb because this one guy has more armed protection than this Nazi's dream in Moonraker or this power-armoured bastard in Die Another Day. The RPG turret people are constantly bothering you, and it feels very disproportionate to what's actually going on. This guy is trying to run away from an agent and go back to being incognito. It's not even like he's using the men's lives to cover his escape, as he keeps stopping to try and take James out. Mate, 30 people cannot kill this guy. What makes you think that you stopping and helping out making it 31 is going to make that big of a difference? I found this segment to be tedious because the cover is very lacking in several bits and you can die a lot. Checkpoints are mostly merciful, but there was one instance where the checkpoint didn't work and I had to go back 2 checkpoints because I died. Which honestly depressed the fuck out of me because I really hate this segment and just want it out of the way. Also, despite there being a bit where you could zipline, you had to wait for permission to use it, even though this level is supposed to feel somewhat time sensitive. Even if you're just trying to create an illusion, which a lot of games do really, you at least need to make it so that the pursuer isn't standing there. You need to create that sense of urgency. And if you have created it, don't fucking squander it by punishing players who try and act on it. shit. In a stronger game like Half-Life 2, there's usually a reason why you can't immediately go after somebody. Like there's an obstruction, or you have to wait for an elevator to reach you, or something like that. There's no reason why James can't just zipline across earlier, other than the game doesn't want you doing it yet. So I guess it's time for James to play Angry Birds on his Sony Xperia or try and reach that bogey at the back of his nose. The second level is a motorbike chase, which is a little more imaginative but kinda fails because it looks like unearthed Trail of Ibn Battuta, and the people look like those cardboard cutout characters that used to attend sports events in the early 2000s. The obstacles just sort of throw themselves at you, giving you very little time to react. I do understand that this is meant to be an intense scene, but with controls as clunky as these, you really will have a hard time reacting to half of this shit. By the way, don't you guys just hate it when you have a head-on collision with a truck whilst riding your motorcycle and have to readjust a cunt to get back on the road? I personally hate that a lot, it's why I stopped cycling altogether. After all of that, we get to the train segment, which only happens because this dumb bitch is stupid enough to just let him get on the train. I do love that James is already flying off of the bridge on his bike, because he just knew she'd fuck up and didn't even give her the chance to succeed. He just knew she was that incompetent. It was a certainty. So then, James and Sister Patrice have a fight on the train. This is probably my favourite bit as it's just a fist fight and it's probably the most mechanically sound and visually impressive part of the segment. Which is sad because it doesn't look or play that great compared to the rest of the game, but I stand by what I said, it is the highlight of this shit. Anyway, this moron accidentally gives James a belly button piercing with a sniper rifle, and James falls off of the train, and this bitch is too useless to think to take another shot. So Sister Patrice gets away, and James falls in the water, and starts remembering his life, and the whole game starts all over again.
Ah, fuck no!
Nah, it actually just cuts to this boss battle, which is my least favourite part of the entire game. So, you know when a kid gets a map kit, like Source SDK or something, and they just make a map with a random character stood in the middle with a lot of health and ammo for no good reason, and you just have to shoot him 1,000 times and not get shot yourself, and you end up feeling like you've had a massive battle? It's basically like that. The map design is kinda cool, with the millions of windowed off areas, but you'll quickly notice the flaw that there's no obvious cover outside of these pillars. That's because the cover is actually the windows, or rather, the lower segment of the windows, which are apparently invulnerable. Obviously it took me a bit to get this, the game makes no mention of it, and it doesn't really occur to me given that the top half of this shit is sugar glass. I didn't expect the bottom half to be made of diamond. Once you know what you're doing, it's kinda tedious, and you have to ask why this guy can get shot in the head multiple times with a pistol and not even die. Especially when it takes everyone else in this universe a quick slap to the back of their head to put them out of commission. Anyway, the game ends with Judi Dench quitting after she told Bond not to in a previous episode. And I guess the rest is Skyfall the movie. Yeah, the game ends here. So, Legends is an interestingly flawed game. I don't think that I could say that it's outright bad in good conscience. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than a lot of later Call of Duty campaigns, as it wasn't an endless game of follow the leader and it actually allowed me to think for myself every now and then. However, to quote Captain Price, it's not hard to improve on garbage. And with that in mind, I'd say that this game has some real squandered potential. I'm assuming they had development issues, maybe as far as budget is concerned, but that is just mostly conjecture on my part, as I couldn't really find much by way of the development history of this game, at least nothing that was honest and explained why it looked like this and why it played like this. The bottom line is that I couldn't really find any true evidence that alluded this to being a certainty, but it seems like the most obvious explanation. It did have some real veteran devs and some real talent behind it, and it's a bit of a shame because, like Daniel Craig's voice, it turned out accurate to the source material, but it just has very little to no soul, or just comes across as very inept or even rushed. It's kind of sad that this is the last Bond game to be made on home consoles, as Bond seems like an ideal candidate for a video game incarnation. I can't help but think how good it would be for a video game Bond universe, similar to what Spider-Man did or with what Telltale did with several properties. From what I've been told from a friend of mine who's really into Bond, Agent Under Fire on the PS2 actually did this, but quickly ditched the idea for a Pierce Brosnan likeness in future installments, and then they dug up Sean Connery for that Russia with Love game. Whilst it might not have worked so well in the past, I think it might be worth attempting again, given that it has proven to have worked at this point. In fact, people are more angry when the character looks like the film version, as we've seen with Spider-Man. They like the original design based on nobody in particular. Besides, anyway, what's the worst that can happen? People go back to liking Bond again? It's not that big of a gamble. You've got a whole mountain of money that you stole off of kids as you tried to turn them into gambling addicts. I'm sure you can spend some of it on a Bond game. One thing that I do want to bring up is that I found it kind of funny that this game was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Video Game Writing in the Writers Guild of America Awards. And I can't help but ask, why? No, seriously, none of the dialogue is original. It's all taken from the films, and any that isn't is just passable placeholder dialogue. It actually lost to Uncharted 3, which I personally would say deserves it a lot more, given that it's an original work, but honestly, I would have suggested Telltale's Walking Dead over either of them, as that did have some very strong writing at the time. Though, then again, they awarded Star Wars Force Unleashed for writing. Yeah, the writing in Star Wars Force Unleashed got an award. I don't understand that. Humanity's fucked.
Yeah, this is for Professor Curious. Yeah. Woo!
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. Yeah, Professor Curious is a little kid who doesn't understand English about me, so yeah.
Hello. Not the best setup, but, well, it's quite late, and I'm quite tired, and I've put everything away, so I just wanted to end this little segment by saying thank you to literally anyone who's had anything to do. I was going to say anything to involve, but no, sorry. As I said, late, tired. But yeah, anyone who's had any involvement with this channel over the past 5 years, whether it's Loz, whether it was my friends who watched my first episode and gave me feedback on it, whether it was the K9 or Solar Farley, those guys always are around. The Wolf Princess, she's absolutely bloody brilliant. Lady Butterflies and Raz and Hatman and Mr. G and Stu and Lou and Stu Dog and Lulu Bieberful to clarify. Wannabeard the Pirate, of course. I know I'm going to forget people, I know, but honestly, if you've ever even commented once, you know, even 2 Liter J and Esteban and all those people, like, even those people who just comment, like, I genuinely love that interaction. It's what I do all this for. It's absolutely incredible, and I legitimately can't believe it's been 5 years of this, you know, and it gets better every year for me. I think I'm long beyond the point where I was aiming for.
So at this point, it's like, where can I go? Because it gets better every year. I have a higher sub count, more average views and that kind of shit. And I'm hoping that next year I'll be saying, wow, look at that, I broke that record, or look at that, I did this. And to tell the truth, I honestly can't see myself stopping anytime soon. So thanks to everyone, and I can't wait to be here in like 2025, hopefully, saying the exact same shit. Hopefully with a better backdrop. When I get my own place, I'm going to actually build some sort of a... I mean, I can't have my own studio, but hopefully I'll have something that resembles a backdrop without, you know, kind of like Phalus, ideally. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, and yeah, you lot are absolutely bloody amazing, and I don't think I'd be here without you. So thanks, and I'll hopefully I have at least 2 more things planned, planned by Christmas, so hopefully I'll reach those deadlines.
Vielleicht noch curious about pushing.